Hello and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. Um, Folks, this show is organized around this notion of the soul of business, and um, the question about where does the soul reside is an interesting question to unbundle, particularly when we put it in the framing of leadership. I've been doing leadership development work, L&D work. Oh, good Lord, almost 45 years now. And when I first started, there was a whole lot of focus on the cognitive development, or the development of a cognitive approach to leadership development. And you got to kind of think yourself into where you want to go and that sort of stuff, which is all well and good. There's no problem with that. Just pro forma here, but the idea that that is all of what we want to focus on as leaders, is something that is a bit of a fallacy here, and it's not more than just a bit of a fallacy. It actually gets us into, I think, some significant deep water if we're not really paying attention. My guest today, Rachel Ryder, has got a fascinating book out called "Who You Are Is How You Lead." And I'm struck by this title. It's not what you do is how you lead, it's who you are that is how you lead. And she's done some fascinating work in her own personal development that has lent itself to the development of the organization that she founded and is now leading. It's called MettaWorks. And she got her coaching certification at Columbia University. And she is steeped in some very interesting old traditions that speak to something other than just cognition. And it really is about this inner life that the leader can't not bring to the table. Who I am goes with me wherever I am. And I can try and compartmentalize that. I can try and say, well, I'm different at work than I am at home. Yeah, no, you're not. The who you are shows up. Now, you can put on a different suit of clothes and you can behave a little bit differently, but that doesn't address the who. So I wanted to have a conversation with Rachel here about this, because it's very in alignment with the work that I do with my clients. And I love the way that she approaches this. So strap in. I think we're going to have a fascinating conversation. And I just want to welcome Rachel Ryder to the show. How you doing?
It's so good to be here, Blaine. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. I want to just start with just this notion of the soul of business. When you hear that phrase, what does that bring up for you?
I actually am a firm believer that your business has an energy and has a soul. And that in order to be as powerful a leader as you can, is you need to have a very positive and strong relationship and connection to the energy, the soul of your business. And so I deeply believe actually that when we talk about the soul of the business and the soul of ourselves, that we have to be in true connection and in a beautiful dance with ourselves and our business in order to actually care for it and allow it to care for us. So I actually see our business, the company we lead and work in, as having a true soul. And the more we nurture and attend to and understand that, the better we can show up for it and ourselves, and the better it can show up for us.
Yeah. So that brings up the question, how do I understand that soul? How do I find a way to begin to make it visible, number one, so that I can begin to appreciate what it is, number two?
Yeah, what a beautiful question. So I actually do this a lot with my clients, not just with understanding the soul of their business, but energies that they are maybe trying to access within themselves. I had a client recently who was third generation in a very successful family business, first female leader. And she was talking to me about how she doesn't know what feminine leadership looks like because her model has
Oh,
been such masculine leadership.
yeah.
And so I actually think what we did with her actually mirrors what you and I are talking about in terms of accessing the soul of your business, because I've done that with my clients too, is going on a deep journey within, almost a meditative state where you go to a sacred place within yourself and actually invite that energy to meet you. And I actually did that with her,
That's
saying, invite the feminine leadership energy to greet you, to offer you something. And she was blown away by what visited her. It was this old, wise woman in furs, and she handed her a gift. And so I feel like this is actually the beautiful kickoff to our conversation about how this work is not just living in the cognitive realm, but it actually arrives in the spiritual and somatic realm. And the more we can, I would say the cognitive is important. We need
mhm.
to be aligned with our cognitive minds and our psyches. It needs to make sense. And that cognition also needs to be in alignment and in conversation with our spiritual experience, with our somatic experience. And so when we have a journey inward and experience what the feminine leadership feels like or what the soul of our business is, then we can pull that up as we're thinking cognitively. How do I want to engage with my business differently? Then we
Uh-huh.
have that felt sense of what it needs and what it wants.
I love that call to invite it in, to invite it to appear. Yeah, far too often I've worked with people where they're going, I've got to go find my purpose.
Yes.
No, you don't need to go find your purpose is already there, and it's the noise in your head and it's the noise around you that is preventing you from actually noticing what that purpose actually is and what it could be and how it gets expressed. In the work that you do with your clients, once, and we'll just take this woman as an example. Once, that wise woman showed up, how did you work with her to actually have it be something that was fungible, that we could actually
Yeah.
do something with, or that she could
Yeah.
actually do something with?
I love that. And I really love this question, Blaine, because I feel like this is the work that both you and I do, which is we are the conduit between the ephemeral or ethereal and the concrete, that our actual gems that we offer is that translation
Mm-hmm.
from how did she have this powerful experience to the concrete, what did that look like? And so this is the thing about the somatic or the inward journey that is so powerful, um, that it is non-cognitive, is she actually had this felt sense of the power of this woman. She felt it in her body. As we're doing the journey inward, she said the power of this woman took her breath away. And so knowing that on a neurological level means you can access it actually quicker and
Mm-hmm.
deeper than the cognitive. And so what we started to play with is cognitively identifying, okay, where are there moments actually she does want to show up in this energy? Usually it was in the boardroom with her father,
Uh-huh.
with her brother, where she wanted to show up differently than how they were doing it, where there were a lot of strong opinions and old baggage. And so once we cognitively identified these scenarios where it was really important for her to embody this different energy, we had a kind of a map or template. So she had this intentionality when she stepped into these meetings specifically, that she could then invoke that experience. Sometimes she would feel that old wise woman standing next to her and speaking through her. Sometimes it was just the felt sense of her in her that would allow her to speak from a very different energetic point that
Yeah.
could help disrupt some really old relational dynamics in the room.
Yeah, I love that because you interrupt the pattern, something else becomes possible. And as long as the pattern's running, nothing else can get in. I love the way that you talk about the somatic experience, Uh, yeah, I know that you spent 3 years earlier, learning a whole somatic. I'll use the word discourse, but it was really an epistemology, just kind of getting into what is this really about. And yeah, I'm a certified master somatic coach. I spent about 3 years, working in this domain. And one of the things that has always struck me, and my mentor, my teacher at that time, Richard Strozzi, said, yeah, the beauty of working with somatics is that everybody's got a body and the body goes everywhere you go.
Yeah.
And and the body is an incredible resource, not just because it carries your head, but because it is an incredibly rich communication conduit that if you're tuned into it, you can really begin to notice things that you've never noticed before, and possibilities emerge in ways that they've never been able to emerge before. And it's having to do with just paying attention to the sensational dynamic that lives in my body. It's a fine-tuned tuning fork. I mean, it vibrates in some fascinating ways depending on what the stimulus is. And at least this is my experience. And being able to decipher that messaging is part and parcel of, I know, the work that you do with your clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm just
Well,
kind
I
of
was going to
prefacing some
say,
things there.
yes, no,
Sure.
I totally agree. It's so good to know that you worked with Strozzi. I worked with Peter Levine,
Oh,
and my
Peter.
training.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so Peter Levine is this founder of somatic experiencing, and so really
Yeah.
works in trauma and the nervous system. And so I want to be very clear: I don't work with trauma, but the premise stands that things
Mm.
live within the nervous system that don't know time or
Yeah.
cognitive processing. And I love to talk about with my leaders that if your brain knows something is okay, but your body does not, that is a beautiful sign that something is living stuck in the nervous system. So, an
Yeah.
example, I have a CEO, he runs a 100-person organization, $200 million organization. There's a lot on the line. The tech industry is tough right now. And we've been talking about how he knows he's going to be okay. He's very well respected. If this venture doesn't work out, something else will. He's got a beautiful network. And yet he is having panic attacks at night.
Yeah.
And we've talked about how clearly when there's a disconnect between mind and body, something's stuck and living in the body. And we've talked about how the panic of it not being okay, despite him knowing his survival doesn't depend on it, means that that experience is very young. And so
Yeah.
what we worked with is how do we pull out this young kid from his nervous system to know it doesn't need to be in charge anymore. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to take care of him anymore. We did this beautiful work around how when he starts to experience the bodily experience of panic, that he see his little child, the little version of him playing with his dog.
Yeah.
And that little version of him can play with the dog while he shows up to the board meeting talking about their new direction.
Yeah.
And so just the power and I even remember him being in one of our sessions and being like, okay, this doesn't make any sense, but and I was like, exactly, we are working in the body.
Yeah. It doesn't work up here.
Right, exactly.
You
Exactly.
know, and I'll just check this out with you, but yeah, every leader that I've ever worked with, there's a story about who they are that kind of gets in the room before they do.
Mm.
So people end up dealing with the story rather than the person. And as a consequence of that, there's all kinds of noise that gets into the conversation that makes it difficult to move. And the leader themselves also is very cognizant oftentimes of their story, just as you were talking about with this fellow. There's a story about who I think I am. I'm the kind of person who I'm not the kind of person who, all that kind of stuff. And what I found is that every story has at least three components to it that can be worked with. And one of them is the philosophy. It's kind of my way of understanding the world. And then the other is the psychology. It's kind of how I position myself in the world. And then the other one is the physiology, how I move through the world. And I
Mm.
found that the physiology, which is a somatic exploration, the physiology is actually the easiest one to facilitate a breakthrough with. If you can actually,
Mm.
begin to work with people on that physiological, which is a somatic conversation. How are you holding yourself? Where's your breathing? Where do you notice tightness? Notice the distinction between sensation and feeling. How does it get encoded? Those sorts of things. That kind of an inquiry begins to open up stuff that a simple didactic cognitive conversation oftentimes doesn't, because it may make intellectual sense, but it doesn't move because the body's stuck.
Oh, I
Is
completely agree.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a beautiful way to put it, Blaine. And I think that's why, when I've been working with folks and in organizations, someone will say, I once worked with a leader, a co-founder who was just being alienated by his team because he had such sharp elbows. People were working around him, working with the other co-founder, and we were working together for a while. And someone put in his 360 feedback, like, I don't know what you did with the old, but I don't want them back. This new one is terrific. And it's
Mm-hmm.
because we go to
Makes
the
a
body,
difference.
because that is the shortcut, because often the cognitive is playing out the conflict with itself and the body.
The nature of life is evidenced in nature. Nature grows, and all of nature honors the desire to be more, to have more, and to do more. Life thrives when it's allowed to grow. And ideally, thriving is what we also, all of us, want to be able to do. Unfortunately, at some stage in life, most people find themselves settling into what I can only call a rut. And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with the ends kicked out. You want to quickly get out of any rut that you find yourself in. When you stop growing, that's when the coffin starts to appear. The simple truth is this, and this is true for everything in nature. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Every one of us dies. So the question we need to come to grips with is not, are we going to die? The question nature asks us to answer is, are we truly living? That's what motivation is about. It's the desire to move. It's the desire to grow and to excel. Have I lived? How have I lived? I'd love for you to take advantage of my Leadership Mindset Masterclass. It's all about providing you with the tools to ensure thriving for yourself and for those around you. Register today to receive the free introduction video and find out more about this acclaimed program. You'll also receive a copy of my international #1 bestseller, Compassionate Capitalism, A Journey to the Soul of Business. I'm Blaine Bartlett, and I look forward to helping you thrive. Back, folks. Before Rachel and I took a break, I unceremoniously interrupted her because I wanted to get something in place here, and we're going to pick it up where we left off before. So you were talking about a client, or you were going to begin to reference a client that in this whole somatic discourse, you had a very interesting experience with that. Yeah, kind of pick it up from there, if
Yeah,
you wouldn't mind.
I feel like what you're talking about the somatic piece being I hate to use the word shortcut because somatics is a very powerful, not shortcut tool. But if you're looking for results, it absolutely is. I had a client who, as a co-founder, had really sharp elbows. And so the entire team was working around him, going to the other founder because they felt like no one wanted to talk to him. And so he came to me to work together. And after 6 months to a year of work, his 360 reviews were like, I don't know what you did with the old one, but we don't want him anymore. We'll keep the newer version. And people started reaching out and feeling like he had their back. And it was all because we started working with his somatic experience of urgency. He was constantly demanding of people, constantly hypercritical. Because he had this sense of urgency, we have to do a good job. And as we examined how much that lived in his body versus how much of that was true. Like the cognitive is important. We have to understand what is actually urgent versus what is that felt sense of, oh my God, I have to get back to this Slack right now, or this email needs my response in the next 5 minutes instead of it being able to wait 10 hours.
Yeah.
And so really examining that and where that urgency is coming from and the belief system wrapped around it could not be in the cognitive, but actually on the body level.
Yeah.
I'd ask him, where does that live in you? What color is it? What texture? Does it have a voice? And the more we had a true conversation with his body, the more those habitual neural pathways actually could unravel in a way where the cognitive understanding could never go.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that example. You know, James Joyce wrote a number of books, obviously, but one was called The Dubliner. And I don't know if you're
Mm.
familiar with it, but the opening line in in the book was, "Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body," and
I don't know that line. That's a good one.
and that has been my experience with a lot of particularly high performance leaders that value them, that their identity is wrapped in the results that they produce, and that linkage becomes so pervasive that they lose sight of the fact that they're actually in a relational uh, petri dish, that they have to actually work with others in order to produce those results. And that gets to be an interesting conversation when we start unbundling that, obviously. And it's not just about the cognition, as you're saying. There's a whole other dimension that if we can have clients that are willing to take the risk, to take the dive, it gets to be interesting.
That's so beautifully said, Blaine, about how this identity with performance is so pervasive, and yet really the true performance is linked to the relationships of the people in their organization.
Yeah.
And that's really the premise of my work too. And it's so interesting because though counterintuitive, it can be very relieving to a leader to say, oh, right, I don't have to hold the whole ship together. I have to
Yeah.
foster relationships with folks who foster relationships with folks that actually create and hold the ship together.
You know,
And that piece, what are you going to say?
no, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, this is a wonderful thread. I want to just kind of keep going on this.
Yeah, and that piece, that piece of work to shift from I am not the performance to I am, the conductor of this stunning performance is
Mhm.
actually very intense and very powerful. I actually have been working with a CEO who viscerally it feels like all of the demands of the company, which is a large company, becomes him.
Yeah.
And this is the somatic piece we've been working with is how do we help him feel his body boundary so that he knows that every demand that comes in, every person asking something of him, every piece of money he has to fundraise doesn't live in him, but is outside of him. And
Yeah.
when it becomes outside, when we even push that boundary out of his body boundary, somatically, his experience is of space, of clarity,
Yeah.
of perspective, so that he then can actually attend to the relationship instead of obsessing about the task.
Hmm. Yeah. The visual of that, moving it outside, is, I think, very powerful. Particularly those of you that are listening right now. I want you to just kind of explore that in your own experience. When you feel overwhelmed, and the way that the pace of life is for many of us today, we will tend to feel overwhelmed. And there's an internalization that goes on when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. That if I can actually just, first of all, notice where in my body am I holding whatever it is that is overwhelming me, and then find a way to place it outside of myself. And the way that you described it, part of that process is, what color is it? What does it feel like? Is it soft? Is it hard? You start to label. And if I begin to identify something in that way, what I can observe by definition is not who I am. And that you can
Yes.
break yeah, that whole symbiosis, just by simply noticing and labeling and moving it from the inside to the outside, and then it gives you some breathing room. And when you've got breathing room, you're
Exactly.
more resourceful.
I love what you just said, that it is not me. The moment you ask, what color is it? How does it feel? Is the moment your brain starts to understand in your body, oh, this might not be me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the bringing the observer online. We didn't mention this, but I've been a longtime Buddhist practitioner since I was 13. I've done many silent meditation retreats over my lifetime. And that piece has been such a blessing to me in terms of understanding that my thoughts are not me.
Yeah.
And I get to choose when to believe them and when to not. And so, what we're talking about at the somatic level is a very deeper, I think, more sophisticated understanding, is that even that felt sense, that anxiety, that overwhelm actually isn't me. It lives within me,
Mm-hmm.
but I get to decide what I want my relationship to it to be. And that's so powerful and so empowering. And that's just the beautiful, magnificent part of this work.
It is, folks, yeah, that may have sounded like a drive-by comment, and I want to mark this out. It's my relationship with the thing that causes me the aggravation that I have. The thing itself is neutral, but it's my relationship. Change my relationship with something, and the thing itself changes, and that's where life has a lot of potential magic in it, because everything is a relationship. Everything is a relationship, and most people don't understand that the nature of their relationship is what's causing them the problem. It's not the thing, the person, the event. It's the relationship I have with it. That's
That's
Rachel,
so
I
true.
could go on with you forever in this conversation. I really could. This is right in my wheelhouse. I love this stuff. I'm going to quote something out of your book here. And I actually, like I said, I got it last night. Haven't had a chance to really jump into it, but I did read the acknowledgments in the forward here. At the end of one of the many days that I was working on this book, I sat down to dinner with my husband. I just finished chapters 1 and 2 of the book I mentioned proudly, and my husband just stared at me. And he said, "You have an infant, a 3-year-old, you're managing 2 construction projects, a move, and running a business. How did you write chapters 1 and 2?" he asked in disbelief. Being able to navigate the complexity of life is what you bring to the table. This isn't just a theoretical way that you approach the work that you do with your clients. You live this. Folks, I want you to check out Rachel's material. Where can people find out more about what you're up to and who you are?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Blaine. We are at MettaWorks, MEttaWorks.io. You can also find me on LinkedIn under Rachel Ryder, or Instagram, Metta, that's 2 T's, metta.works. Check us out. We'd be so happy to have you.
Oh, folks, it's a rich site. I've been on it. I've poked and prodded all around it. And get a copy of the book. And I'm going to just, those of you that are watching this on video, Who You Are is How You Lead. Yeah, it's available in all of the regular places, obviously. But this is a really well done book. And like I said, I just got it last night and I've thumbed through it. I love the layout and I love the way that Rachel positions this conversation that we've been having on this episode. So, Rachel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd
Such a
love to
pleasure,
have you
Blaine.
back on the show again. We can do a little bit different exploration around another aspect of this, perhaps.
I'd love that. I'd
Okay.
love that.
Folks, you've been listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. Check out my website, blainebartlett.com, or you can also go to learn.blainebartlett.com. And that's the site that's got most of my resource materials and whatnot. A lot of it's available for free. Don't be shy. Yeah, just find out what would be useful for you and download it or ping me and we'll have a conversation. And until next time, Find ways to be a center of distribution in your life, not just a center of accumulation. You'll find that life works a whole lot better when you're working that way. Take care, and I'll see you on the next episode. Hi, I'd like to ask you to do something for me if you wouldn't mind. If you like this episode, I'd like you to not only subscribe on your favorite site, but I'd also like you to give a rating. Ideally, a 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated. But I think more importantly also would be just some comments. That helps with the algorithm, and it helps build the audience with this. And more than anything else, if you could invite somebody else to listen, just share this episode with a friend, with a colleague. And I'd like to see how we can grow the soul of business. I think it makes a difference. Thanks.